Welcome to Soul Thrive, where we explore spirituality through healing trauma, shadow work, and applying the laws of the universe in order to master ourselves without the fear of the unknown.
So in this episode,
we're going to be talking about limited beliefs, cycles, and patterns, which is what I taught, I think, about 2 weeks ago in the Soul Thrive membership platform. And you just recently went away to Arizona. You took a trip by yourself.
Yeah.
Which was, I mean, I love the fact that you actually can travel by yourself because I'm someone who can't. I need people to guide me places because I'm always feeling all the energy in the space.
Where are we going?
Yeah, where are we going? What are we doing? I can't, I can't
don't function in the 3D world. That's Christina.
It can be very hard. But I do admire people who just go and travel and, and the bonus is that you were really trying to connect with your personal limitations, some cycles and patterns that you wanted to break.
Yeah.
And above that, you wanted to sit with your loneliness, which I think is very, very important when you're on this healing journey.
Yeah.
I always tell everyone that sitting with your loneliness, being with your loneliness, there is a difference between, being alone. Mm-hmm. And people are like, no, I like my alone time. That's different than actually feeling the depths of loneliness.
Yeah. And what I liked about I felt that the workshop was very timely.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of things in terms of breaking cycles. And I know it's kind of related to the workshop, the podcast episode that we just recently did on limited mindset. But you talked about how we all have cycles that we fall into.
Yes.
That we are unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to break free of those cycles, you talked about having to... So the reason why, I guess, people go into cycles is because they don't want to feel certain feelings.
100%, yes. Yes.
So because you talked about the coping mechanisms, the typical addictions, the drinking, the smoking, the sex, the shopping, the working, the numbing to not feel. But these coping mechanisms can be so nuanced.
Yeah.
And you've called me out in the workshop.
Yeah.
As you often do.
I usually like to do that because it's not calling out. It's just what happens is whenever I'm teaching a class or a workshop, people's energy is always communicating something to me. So you could verbally be communicating something to me, but your energy is communicating something completely different to me.
Right.
And so it's almost like, okay, I kind of like collectively look at the energy in the group. And then the person that lights up to me the most is the person that I tend to go to.
And the person that lights up, is that like the part of them that wants to resolve whatever it is that we're working through? It
also is collectively in the experience in the moment. So it's almost like a collective experience. Everybody's kind of feeling the exact same feeling and they want to resolve in that specific way. And you probably are the closest to the alignment of the resolve. And so that's where you would light up. And then I would choose that person, knowing that they'd apply the information for integration, to heal that part of themselves, right? And I know that you're somebody that has committed to the work for a very long time. So you tend to energetically, collectively, help people, whether you realize it or not, like a catalyst to kind of, you ask your right questions, and then you apply that to yourself as well. So yeah.
So that's what I meant. So you called me out, and so my cycle was something a little bit different.
Yeah.
It was quite nuanced, I would say, and it was all about, so it's related to a limited mindset, but it's all about accepting, it's almost like accepting crumbs or not asking life for more, or not asking more of experiences, or not trusting the universe that it would give you more. So we talked about sort of where that comes from, and we talked about how it comes from my dad's beliefs, and it's related to the limited mindset. And then you started talking about that. This was the most actually fascinating part. You've asked us to think about all of the different parts of us, all of the different fragments that would show up to not allow you to feel what you are feeling, which it could be the loneliness, the sadness, the whatever it is, because the cycles are there to numb you. Ultimately, that's what you're saying. The cycles are there to not allow you to feel what you need to feel. So I'd rather go out there and do something else.
Distraction.
Right.
Well, I mean, most people tend to do that, even when they're in the positive frame of things or in the positive focus of things, or if they even refer to themselves as mentally strong individuals. There is an element of bypass. There is an element of, as long as I'm goal oriented, as long as I'm moving in a direction, as long as I'm keeping myself distracted and busy, then I'm not going to feel the feelings. Right? And so when we talk about parts, we're talking about these parts of us that are on board with not feeling the feeling. But then there are other parts of us that want to resolve the conflict within us. They want to feel the feeling and break the cycle. They want to stop the limitation, even though there may be an assumption that you are thriving in your life because you're achieving your goals and you're setting those expectations, which goes back to what we were talking about, success and mindset and image and all that kind of stuff, which to the average person, when you're looking at that looks really amazing, because you're like, oh my God, this person's getting everything, and they're so happy and they're having all their experiences, but yet why are they not happy?
But they're not fulfilled. Yeah. So
and that goes into like the depths of like, you know, the person that may commit suicide. And like you look and observe at their lives and they have everything, and you're like, I have no clue. I don't understand what happened.
Yeah, what is it that they don't have or that they haven't experienced?
Right,
yeah.
And so I think we have to get better at being able to not only see things past the image and what we're achieving and what our successes are, but to really get to the core of how people operate. And like, if we understand that, it gets better with connection. I can then really get to know you for you instead of all those layers of like how you present yourself to be.
Yeah. And those layers, I feel like that's a really good way to describe the parts, right? Yeah. So you talked about how, you know, people think as long as they're going, achieving, doing. So you asked me a question in the workshop. So it was all about, okay, so then what is the cycle that you want to break? And the cycle that I wanted to break was actually like asking more of the universe, because I've always felt like, oh, I should just accept what is given to me and be grateful. And that's where, because
I mean, it's not your fault. Spirituality also teaches us this like false sense of what gratitude is supposed to look like. And so I think that there is a spiritual principle that's being used in the wrong context. It really is like, oh, you should, most people, assume that abundance or creating or alignment is gratitude. And it actually isn't. And so, and like the idea that I should just be grateful for all the things that I have because somebody else has less than me is also kind of covers this idea of, I don't have the right to be upset. I don't have the right to be
it's
unhappy. I don't have the right to feel my feelings because somebody else has it worse.
Yeah. And I remember in the workshop, we talked about where that came from. And it was because we did come from a country that was experiencing war. And my dad would always say, well, look at all these other people that lost everything that they had. We didn't lose everything. So you should just be grateful for what you have. So then I guess the child in me just took that, internalized it, and said, well, I guess I'm just going to accept whatever comes my way. I'm not going to ask for more, and I'm just going to settle.
I also think, too, it comes back to I'm not going to question it.
Right.
So sometimes people get into the pattern where they think to themselves, well, I'll settle for whatever shows up. And as long as I'm achieving to make people around me happy, then that's great. But I'm not going to question why I'm doing it.
Right.
I'm not going to question why I feel that I need to, prove myself. Or I'm not going to question why I'm so exhausted right now, but yet I'm still pushing against myself. I'm not going to question, because I should be grateful for the experiences that have been given to me, and I have no right to say, question, do, or be different.
Right. And in the workshop, you asked me, how does that actually feel?
Yeah.
And
you got into your victim mentality a little bit.
Yeah, but it was really sad.
Of course it would.
It's sad because I'm like, okay, so this is all I have. I have
right.
these limitations and I have nothing else.
Right. But then let's go into the victim mentality, which is that cover part, that part that shows up that goes, okay, well, to one of two things. I still don't want to resolve the conflict.
Right.
Meaning like the victim mentality is coming in with the narratives, the story that I'm not allowed to, or I feel really bad, or I'm a really bad person.
If I ask for more.
Right. And then that kind of disarms another person from asking any more questions. So with the victim mentality, it's like you can disarm me and I now look like an asshole for questioning why are you not desiring more? Because the victim mentality is like creating this big reaction, which isn't even a real reaction. It is not even an expression of a real emotion. It actually is like almost like a show. Like I'm putting on a little bit of a show so that people around me are feeling pity for me or sad for me, or someone's going to show up and intervene for me, save me, and then they're going to give me the thing that I desire without directly going towards it. And then you have someone who's like me, who's what I refer to as like the authority figure, right? The leader aspect, someone who's going to question you. And be like, well, why can't you just do that for yourself? Or why can't you just step up? Or why can't you make that happen for yourself? And that becomes a contradiction to what your belief systems and your limitations are. Now there's a conflict. Now it's you against me. There's a zero-sum game. Who's gonna win against each other, right? So the victim mentality is coming in almost like a weapon to say, you have no right to continue having this conversation with me.
Right.
And
I can't be a bad person. I can't be seen as greedy. I have to just stay in here and be grateful for what I have and just
Right. Or like have the image and the other experiences come in to kind of show people, hey, you know what? I am accomplishing. I am doing. I am living in my joy.
That was the other layer,
right?
Because I actually have to sit down and write down like what are all the aspects or like parts of me, like the layers of me that have kept me from feeling that pain of like actually, because it's like the inner child is just saying, I really can't have what I want.
Yeah.
And that's very painful.
Not only is it painful, but now I have to manipulate to get what I want.
Yeah.
And then the manipulation then becomes, how do I do it? Most people will respond to somebody who's crying.
Right. So victim. Right. It's the crocodile tears. Yeah.
Remember that?
I know.
Do you remember that one time I was like, oh, hang on, I can't. You have crocodile tears right now. Let's get to the core.
Someone please come here and tell me everything's going to be okay. I'll find a new job.
Right? And then when you sat with that, it was like, why am I freaking out or having this moment when I can just sit down and rationalize this and make sense of it and end that cycle? So in Arizona, you said that you were really sitting with this factor. What do you think that you registered, and as far as the cycle goes, like what you want to break?
So yes, but before I tell you that, I just wanted to kind of, because the trip to Arizona was almost like, I'm not going to do what I always do. So if I always either engage with my victim mentality or I go into the other aspect that you talked about, or I'm just going to achieve. I'm going to do and I'm going to go and I'm going to be all these things and I'm going to have all like, I'm going to work and I'm going to travel and I'm going to like just work on this like external image so that so that I don't feel the pain. So I feel like worthy, because the inner child feels the universe tells me that I can't have what I want. And that's very painful and I don't feel good enough and I don't feel worthy of having the experiences that I want. But that's too painful for me to feel. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to be a boss bitch. Right? I'm going to travel. I'm going to do things. I'm going to work out. I'm going to buy expensive clothes. But it's all for the wrong intention to cover up, which is what you always talk about. People putting on this image, and that's where Instagram is so bad, because people think that's thriving, but that's not thriving, because I've done that for so long and it doesn't work. So when we talked about that, I was like, okay, so then what can I do to break the cycle? So I have to do something different. So I'm like...
But different not in the sense of doing, different in the sense of feeling.
But so I said to myself, what do I do to create an environment for me where I can actually sit down and then feel it? and at the same time face that part of me that feels like it's maybe not worthy of having the experiences that I want, and that part is very lonely.
Well, yeah, because when we hit a layer, when we hit those layers, it goes back into the rejection wound aspects as well, right? And so you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to go so far deep in the victim mentality that you're going to seek for external validation, and you're going to opt out for the healing. You're going to say, I tap out, I'm done. Right. And then you're going to make an enemy of all the layers that you've already done. You've pushed them away. And you may even make an enemy of the people around you that held you accountable.
That represent those layers.
And represented the truth of those factors, right? And then they would push you away, right? Or you'll push them away. Sorry, was that what I meant was you'll push them away.
Right.
Which is, I've seen happen in this field and the way that I have structured even my work and my experience, I can literally tell when someone's going to flip that. And even if I warn them, like, you're too far in the victim mentality, or you're pushing against yourself, or you're doing this, or this is the reject, doesn't matter, because at that point, the victim mentality has taken over so much that, and the cycles and the coping mechanisms and the achieving, all of that, you're getting a dopamine hit from.
Totally. Yeah.
You're getting a high from. And so, and then if you add, I'm making money, or I'm looking good, and people are validating that I'm looking good and I'm feeling good.
Meanwhile, I'm still feeling like...
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But you're still you can avoid it to the degree where you're either in like an addict would, right? Like they're like totally immersed in the addiction. But then you can even go as far as the dopamine hit of chasing the experiences to maintain that type of euphoria, so you're really not feeling the depths of the experiences. And it can be extremely detrimental. I do find that those people do have psychotic breaks at some point.
Right.
They'll have an emotionally unhinged experience at some point and break down completely, which is kind of like, I feel like a really important experience to happen, so you can kind of get realigned again. And really face a lot of things. Now, does everybody face their shit? No. But yeah, I victim mentality and loneliness and rejection. I really want people to get better at accessing those parts of themselves.
Yeah.
And you'll find more truth in who you are when you do.
Totally. And then it doesn't have that hold on me where I have to. So that's why I said to myself, okay, I'm going to go on this trip. I'm going to take 4 or 5 days. I'm going to go alone. And I'm also going to go alone to a place where there's going to be a lot of couples.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, because here's the thing. I've done the whole Bali solo thing. We already know that's where people go to, like, eat, pray, love. So everybody that's there is like single. You don't feel those additional feelings. So I'm like, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to put myself in those uncomfortable situations. Yeah. So here I am. I need a table for one.
Yes.
I'm checking in, and the girl at the front desk is like, will you be needing a second key? And I said, no. Or like that man at the coffee machine who asked me, well, where are you guys from? Thinking that like my boyfriend or my husband was in the room. And I'm like, I'm from Toronto. And like, he completely was oblivious. But those are things that would normally trigger me. And they did trigger me. And I went on my hikes and I went on my solo dinners. And I was like, I have to feel what it feels to sit in this room right now, or to be doing this hike and being in this top of this mountain all by myself, to feel the feelings that I for my whole life did not want to feel. You really dove into, because Arizona's extremely spiritual, so you're like, I'm all in, which is great. I was like, screw it, like I needed to go. Like that place just called out, but I realized how much I never really wanted to feel. And I think for me, it was also really hard to feel that in Toronto, because, the job calls you and then you're wanted, you're busy, you're like distracted. You've got your friends, you've got all these things that you're doing. And here it's like, I don't know anyone. I'm going to be alone 99.9% of the time, minus the interaction with the waiter. Like, it's just, there's nowhere to run. That's good. And that was really interesting. But I think the bigger part for me was just going out there and being like, no, I'm coming into the sports bar to watch the game, and table for two? No, table for one. Table for one. Like, and I had to keep reiterating that. And everywhere I went, even I did a tour of the Grand Canyon. I was like, 4 other couples, and we had so much fun. And I didn't feel weird. And I was like, this was so interesting. Like 4 older couples, they're all like having a blast. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're all in this van, like heading to the Grand Canyon. And I started to feel a little bit of relief there because I'm like, this isn't so
It's not so bad. It's not so bad.
And I can tell you that I probably felt more connected to myself than I did in many other relationships.
Yes.
Before.
But you also have to understand the moment you become comfortable with the uncomfortable, you've allowed yourself the grace, the openness, the expansiveness to attract the thing that you actually desire, which is to be in a healthy relationship.
Not just any, which is the whole.
There is a difference. There's a difference to be in a healthy relationship with someone where you can have autonomy.
Right. Because I never also felt like I had that.
Because one of your patterns has been losing yourself in relationships.
Yeah.
And why?
And catering to the other person.
Exactly. Yeah. Why? Because that cycle and that pattern that's been created in you is to serve, is to give, is
to soothe,
right?
Yeah.
And to self-regulate others because of your trauma from your childhood. However, it's also the only experience you knew.
Yeah.
You don't know any different.
And I've attracted friends who also had the same dynamic, had the same expectation where I felt like it was always about them and never about me. Mm-hmm. So like that whole cycle, it's not just like romance. It's like everywhere. It was at work too. Like I would attract bosses who didn't give a shit about me, who just wanted, what can you do for me?
Yes.
That has been the dynamic that I've been. So that's one of the cycles. Now it's kind of like
Now you're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Like, another cycle in my life is like attracting people who are like, what can you do for me?
Yeah. And you're still attracting that.
I know.
But the difference is now that you actually can discern.
When something feels off.
You're like, oh, what's up with this person right now coming to me and having a conversation with me about something? Like, what's the ulterior motive?
Especially if you're trying to make it look like you're doing me a favor.
Oh, that's the worst.
But you're not doing
yes.
Like you're looking for something. So, okay, so that cycle. So I'm attracting those types of people. So I get it. Now I can discern who they are. And I guess if we're looking to break cycles, I just need to keep doing that. So breaking a cycle means like no longer engaging.
Right. So I want to also reiterate that breaking a cycle doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to the extreme of like leaving the country or having a trip or doing something like that. I do think that a lot of people do that. They do the escaping. They go on like a retreat or they go on like a trip, and that's fine. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find yourself, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be with yourself, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to heal parts of yourself. You also may, right? What I want people to get really comfortable with is being uncomfortable. Right. Meaning, like when something shows up, don't just try to create the narrative in your mind of what you think it is or the story that you think it needs to be. I want people to get into a place where they can sit, and I mean literally feel it. And you'll notice what area of your body it's going to show up the better you get at feeling it. It may be in your throat, it may be in your stomach, it may be in your chest. You may actually even exhibit a panic attack. You may actually have anxiety around certain experiences. That's when you have to lean into that more. And the better you get at that, the better you're going to recognize what the uncomfortable feelings are. And then you can start to make sense of things. I think that if we try to label everything all the time too, we're like, oh, this is the reason why this is happening is because of this, without having enough context. I think too, because like with trauma, we need to be able to have enough context to say, this makes sense to me. This is the layer that I'm working on right now. And the reason why I'm working on this right now is because I want to get to this place of feeling comfortable, that when someone comes at me, they're upset with me, or they're rejecting me, or someone wants to resolve a conflict with me, or I'm attracting another part of my cycle that I'm seeing based on laws of attraction, because the universe is a big mirror no matter what, right? It's having the awareness of it, and you'll get better at it when the cycle shows up, but you've got to also trust your intuition.
Right.
There's an element of that, right? And this is, I will do a topic on how intuition actually operates when you're working with trauma. Anyone who's doing intuitive work that isn't healing their trauma, they're just operating based on their cycles, patterns, and limitations. And often can project their timeline onto others. So there's that. However, I do feel like the better you get at recognizing those parts of you, and parts of you are always going to look like a part of you that wants to do something, a part of you that doesn't, a part of you that is inquisitive about it, a part of you that is like sweating and like losing it. Like, and the better you get at all those feelings, the more in alignment you're going to feel to yourself, and there will be a state of relief.
Right.
At the end game, no matter what the circumstances are, when we're doing shadow work, and we want to feel a sense of relief.
Right.
We want to feel that move into our body.
Right.
So I think that you recognizing that, and it's good that you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, because that's also kind of manipulating a little bit of your vibration and your frequency.
How so?
So basically, I mean, we all have auras around us, and they all have like they attune to, and we are energy no matter what the circumstances are. And the better that you understand that, the easier it's going to be for you to kind of navigate with, oh, this is in my alignment, this is in my alignment, this is something I want to experience, this is something that I don't want to experience. But we can, if you're working on quantum shifting, have the ability to align with different frequencies. So by putting yourself in the frequency of couples, you were saying, I'm totally comfortable being in a relationship. I'm totally comfortable, even if it's uncomfortable. If uncomfortable situations show up in my life, I'm in the frequency of that I'm willing to be mutable enough to work through it without there being like, for instance, I can look at people who always want to be in a relationship, right? They're always like, oh, does this guy like me? Like, even how many people would be like, oh, I met this person. To me all the time. I'm like, first of all, book an appointment. Second of all, right? They're like, oh, I met this person. What do you think about this person? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think about this person? Like, does this person...
Are you thinking about this person?
Like,
or do you just want someone to like you?
Like, you feel like you're getting attention right now, which feels very validating. What is this person bringing to the table energetically? And are you guys a vibrational match? And what are you guys going to learn from each other? And it's not going to be nice. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up that are going to challenge you. That's what you were saying. By you putting yourself in that situation and feeling all of your emotions and feeling all your parts and the uncomfortable feelings, you were literally telling the universe, hey, you know what? And when and if the right person's going to show up and there's going to be a healthy dynamic, I'm willing to go to that extreme of feeling whatever shows up.
Right.
Instead of blaming them, projecting them, playing the victim with them, manipulating them, using them, and then them doing the exact same thing to me without having clear boundaries. And we don't want that. We want to be able to say, okay, people make mistakes. You're allowed to have the conversation to rectify it, change the dynamic in the relationship. Boundaries are very important. But you're really attuning to that. So frequency is like that. I mean, it's also a thought sometimes, like, you know, having the thought of wanting to have the experience, but then you have to unravel why you have not had the experience. And when we look at the lack of something, that's always in alignment to inner child trauma.
Yeah. And then there's also parts that were not allowing me to have the experiences too, because just to go back to like my parts that I identified, there was another part that was like, you've lost yourself in relationships. All you've done is like soothe other people. All you've done is fix other people. So we're going to build walls and we're just not going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like a 3-4 year pattern where it's like, nope.
I'm going to tell you though, those walls, I mean, when we build walls, we don't just build them now. These walls existed in your childhood. Okay?
Fair.
So the only reason that you're becoming aware of the wall now, you're like, whoa, okay, like this is now like, it's because the pattern has happened so many times. That because you weren't dealing with it, resolving it, executing boundaries with it, nurturing it,
it's like
caring for it.
It had no choice. It was like,
well, it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then most people assume you got to, like when they think I got to break the pattern or I got to break that wall. No. You need to lean into
the wall. It's like, what is the wall trying to teach me? Why did the wall get there in the first place?
Why is it so high to begin with? I need to feel you. And I would even have like visualizations, and I've done this before because I know for my heart for a very long time, again, because there's a preconceived notion about who I am as a person, right?
Right.
And it's not so easy to read me. And sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to just read me, like there's a barrier of protection no matter what the circumstances are. But I was like, how do I like have that protection, but also remain open with an open heart?
Right.
And so I had to visit that part of me over and over and over again that was like, no, people are awful, and like they keep hurting you and they keep taking from you. But I'm also like trying to educate that part of me. But you've also given up parts of yourself, and you've also given to them, and you also, even up until recently, and sometimes when you're asleep, you don't even pay attention to it. That's why it's like you have to have the awareness. You got to wake up. And I do this work every day, and even then, I'm like, oh wow, I totally miss that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to sit with that, be with that, and acknowledge what the wall is trying to communicate to me. And through my visualizations, through my meditations, through journaling, I sit with that and I develop a relationship with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that gives me the opportunity to go, oh, okay, now you went down a little bit. Right. Maybe with this person, you're going to go fully down.
Right.
Maybe with this person, you're halfway. Right? Because you don't really know what that relationship dynamic is going to look like. Mm-hmm. We also had interesting conversations recently where I was like, don't wait until it gets bad. Have the conversation before it gets bad. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that's a very big pattern, cycle.
That's another cycle. I was going to say that's another cycle.
Yeah. And
because the victim mentality doesn't want to have the conversation. It wants to be like, oh no, I'm just going to let it play out.
Or what the worst part of the victim mentality is like you're still showing the facade to everybody that everything's great and everything's perfect and you're such an amazing person, but your behavior is shitty. Meaning like to the person that you want to have the conversation with, to the person that you're feeling that you have conflict with, to the person that you feel like hurt your feelings or you now have created the narrative with in your mind of some sort, you have literally are creating this pattern of, oh, no, I'm going to just show everybody else that I'm amazing. And then I'm going to treat that person like garbage, but I'm also going to gaslight them and manipulate them into not actually having the conversation. So that's why I always say like, I'm a very big observer. So like, I like to observe people's energies, patterns, experiences. Is that a bad thing? No, it's just part of my ability. I can't change that. But I think
doing this work, like we're also being taught to do that.
I'm trying to teach you guys that. Absolutely.
That's part of breaking the cycle instead of just mindlessly going into situations, looking for validation, going back into the cycles.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help.
No, and the worst part is, I think for the work that I do, sometimes people they've developed this relationship with me due to their traumas. Like I'm like their mother, or a representation of that, or their abuser, or like their father, or whatever. And then it's like I'm trying to have these conversations with them. It's my fault. I'll be honest. I'll tell you where my fault is. I never maintained the boundary, and now that's changed, where like my work is my work. So book an appointment, sit with me. We'll have that conversation. We'll have that. And then the friendship is the friendship and it's going to sit over here.
Right.
And then when the friendship is like this, the hard part though is like, if I really care and love for someone and I really place them in a high regard, and I look at that and I can see themselves hurting themselves or like being stuck in a pattern or in the victim mentality, and I try to bring it up, that's where the conflict just gets even worse.
Because they don't want to feel that part.
No. Right. Or change that cycle. Because changing that cycle and pattern is gonna take away the potential of that dopamine hit. Right. And then they don't want to feel the feelings. Right. And then people will say things like, oh, you're always in your emotions, and like, when are you just gonna just have fun and like just go out there and do it? I'm like, I have fun. I enjoy my time. I'm like, what makes you think like this isn't fun? I'm like, the better I get to know myself, the more fun I have.
Yeah.
Like you're not registering that the less you know yourself and the more triggered you get and the more defensive you get, people live rent free in your head. You think
you're having fun, but you're not.
But you're not. People are literally living rent free in your head.
Yeah.
When I resolve that conflict, I go to bed fine. I don't have insomnia.
Yeah.
I don't worry about tomorrow.
So yeah. So I guess, and I know there's part 2 of Breaking Cycles. I think this coming Saturday.
Yeah, we're gonna do part 2.
But I know we talked about my pivot.
Yes.
My personal pivot, just to end.
Yes, the pivot.
The end.
I love
so
that.
to not keep repeating the same cycle is because I know that my victim mentality is so strong, and my intrusive thoughts are going to come in, not to allow me to feel what I need to feel.
Yeah.
So basically, when the mind starts going, oh my God, it starts telling me stories, I have to sit and ask myself, so what do I actually need to feel here?
The questioning.
Right.
Right? It goes back to, I have the right to question.
What am I avoiding not wanting to feel?
I have the right to question.
Right.
Because you've proclaimed to the universe that you take crumbs.
Right.
And people who really register, who am I? Or like want to really evolve as a person, they're inquisitive. They ask questions, not just about the universe and how the universe operates and how this experience is what they literally ask themselves personal questions. They get better at that. They really go, okay, well, why am I feeling this way? Where is this coming from? How can I make this better? Not just for me, for other people around me. Right. How does my energy affect people around me? So on and so forth.
Right.
So breaking patterns and cycle it shouldn't be rigid. It shouldn't be hard. It should be an experience where people can start to define a better sense of who they are. And you'll also allow yourself the freedom to align with better frequencies. Does that make sense?
It does. So get to know all the parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will be doing a workshop soon on parts work.
I think we need a refresher.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, this was really good. I'm glad we had this experience, and I'm glad that you ended up going to Arizona. That's something that I definitely want to go do as well. But
needs to do a retreat there. Maybe.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Thanks for tuning in.